Pomeranz's book is called The Great Divergence: China, Europe, and the Making of the Modern World Economy, published in 2000. Highly influential piece of work, very critically acclaimed, which, as you might have noticed from video one and video two, historians do have a tendency to disagree with each other, and to criticize each other quite heavily. So the fact that has been really well received and has actually, in fact, been reprinted several times with updated introductions, etc., shows you that this is a key book that we should be looking at. So some of the key questions that Pomeranz asks are why did sustained industrial growth begin in Northwest Europe, and why did Europe and China differ in terms of economic growth? So have a think to yourself, maybe pause the video if you want, as to how we can make these two questions relevant to question one on why was sustained economic growth so rare before the later 18th century, and why did that change? So at first glance, there are similarities and points where it's going to be really useful, and there are also points where it's going to be less useful. So remember what we said in the very first video introducing the question about the key parameters of temporality and of spatiality. So you can see in this question at least this huge spatial element because it's asking about industrial growth in Northwest Europe, and it's also comparing, the book is comparing between Europe and China. But you can see actually that in this question there's no comparative element directly to it. Or like we're not comparing spaces, but we're comparing time periods, right? So we're comparing the period before the later 18th century to after the later 18th century. So sometimes it can be a bit of a slip up because if we're too focused on what Pomeranz is saying in the frame, following his own priorities as a historian and asking for comparison between these different regions, we might end up comparing too much between spaces rather than time periods. So do just bear that in mind. And you can also tell sometimes, a little bit of a cheat code, how influential a work has been and how academically a stronger reputation it has by looking at who's published it. So Princeton Press has published it, and they've given us a very useful overview. So for him, Pomeranz's book follows this idea of a great divergence that I think Samuel Huntington came up with, I think in the late 20th century, so fairly recently still. And it's an idea that he's run with. And, for just a summary, you can see quite like a really interesting point. Why is it in 1750 that Europe and East Asia have similar life expectancy, consumption, product, and factor markets? But why is it so different by the 19th century? So he's making the point that this is to do with the location of coal and access to trade with the New World. And he also has segments where he talks about the ecological factors as well.